let's go to my next guest. She is Baroness Claire Fox, the director at the Academy of Ideas, a former Brexit Party MEP, of course, and author of I Find That Offensive. Hi, Claire.
Hello, Kevin.
I wanted to get you on. We'll get to all of today's stories in just a second. But you made a speech in the Lords that chimed with me, that I totally agree with, because I went to both of those demonstrations, both of those protests at the weekend. The Nakba, the pro-Palestine march, and of course the Unite the Kingdom rally as well. Now, the political class, the Westminster bubble gang, especially the Prime Minister, and of course the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, have sought to characterise the Unite the Kingdom march as a sort of cauldron of hatred. You know, the Prime Minister ahead of it saying, "I will not tolerate hatred," you know, because of course if you have right-wing opinions, that means you're full of hate. If you have left-wing opinions, you're full of love. But he made no mention, when he said he wouldn't tolerate hate, he made no mention of the pro-Palestine march. And nor did Sadiq Khan afterwards. He said, "Oh, there are so many extremely disturbing Islamophobic incidents." Well, I can't talk for the whole of the Unite the Kingdom protest, but I went down there for an hour or so when they were in Parliament Square. Very good-natured. I didn't see any masks. You know, it's a sort of almost party atmosphere. Certainly not very much hate. Then I went to Nakba, and it was like a kind of Dick Turpin look-alike contest. Everybody had a mask on, you know, keffiyeh scarves up to the eyeballs, all yelling about death to the IDF, and they wanted Tommy Robinson assassinated in the same way as Charlie Kirk, and so on and so forth. The political class will not acknowledge that that was where the hatred was. It wasn't at Unite the Kingdom. It's two-tier government, a two-tier approach to the right to protest, really.
Yeah, I mean, I was making. I don't want to romanticize the Unite the Kingdom rally, because, you know, there were some pretty unsavory signs, you know, anti-Semitic signs at the Unite the Kingdom one, and there was some sort of quite, you know, some people would say some offensive stuff going on there, and a few characters who I won't necessarily share their views, but your point is absolutely well made. And the point of my speech was to say, we were talking about the national security bill because I was doing the King's speech, and they say we have got to clamp down on extremism from, you know, Islamism, good, and the far right. And I was making the point that why is it when they, you know, don't like that couplet, because they use it as an excuse to then say that they're equally a threat, and we know that that's not true from any of the statistics, and that they always feel much more comfortable having a go at the far right. And I understand that that term far right is used so promiscuously, it's become meaningless. Yeah. People have been called far right. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't far right nasty, you know, tracks around, right? I don't want to, and I spent a lot of my adult life fighting the fascists, as it were, and I don't want to start apologising to people whose views about people with different ethnicities, the colour of their skin and so on is obsessive. But the majority of people who want to unite the kingdom, and we're just attracted to that, or just simply are concerned about mass migration, are worried about the lack of social cohesion when you have a situation of undocumented migrants in a local area not, you know, participating in society, the rise of a kind of radical Islam and a politicized Islamism, that means that people do not feel comfortable in towns around the country. That is not far right, right? That is actually common sense, understandable, people feeling that they want to express that fury, but they also want positively to say, let's have a country that's not divided by the identity politics stuff. I mean, that's the real cause of division, isn't it?
Indeed. Well, talking of which, well set up, Claire. This is breaking news. Let's get your take on it. You will have noticed that kicking and screaming after a long delay, Bridget Phillipson yesterday did at last say, right, biological males are banned from female ladies' loos and female safe spaces. This is breaking news. Women and Equalities Minister Bridget Phillipson has now said that the landmark Supreme Court ruling, and I'm quoting her now, made it clear that sex means biological sex under the Equality Act, and that, and I'm quoting her again now, trans people are still protected by the Act. She laid the long-awaited updated single-sex spaces guidance out in Parliament. So, you know, she held off doing this for a very, very long time. She's finally done what she was legally required to do, which was enforce the ruling of the Supreme Court. But she can't resist getting in, and trans people are still protected by the Act. Well, trans people, if you're a trans woman, in other words, a biological male, you might be protected by the Act, but you are no longer, in any circumstances, allowed into ladies' loos or female safe spaces. So she's got there in the end, but your thoughts?
Kicking and screaming it has been. And I have to give credit to, you know, the grassroots organisations, people like Sex Matters, Women's Rights Network, and of course For Women Scotland, who brought the Supreme Court thing, and many, many more, right? Who basically said, look, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission laid this guidance, gave it to the minister in September. And practically every week since then, in the Lords at least, people have been saying, well, when are you going to release it? When are you going to release it? Now, as it happens, it doesn't do anything other than give some guidance to public institutions about single-sex spaces. But the problem is it's not having it, I mean, it doesn't change the law. The law was being clarified a year ago. But the problem is that all sorts of institutions, NHS trusts, universities, even schools, all sorts of public sector organisations, but also private organisations, have basically refused to implement the Supreme Court's clarification on single-sex spaces, using the excuse that the guidance hasn't been released. And I do think the government and the ministers have acted shamefully here. I mean, you know, they just should have sorted it out earlier. But I want to celebrate it's out now. Mm-hmm. But I also want to note that in the King's speech, they put in a conversion therapy bill. I mean, there's going to be in this session an attempt at laying down a bill or writing a bill that will mean that if you are, say, for example, a therapist or a teacher or a religious person or even a parent who says to your child, who says, I am a different sex, you know, buying the gender stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And they might be distressed, but if you try and say to them, no, don't worry, you could be accused of conversion therapy, and that could be illegal. So this is, you know, it's like they can't, it's 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back. And at the same time, they've announced today, this is a classic that I want everyone to know about, the UK is proudly going to host the European International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, that's fine, right? All right, that, and transphobia. Because what they've done is they've managed to get transphobia in, and they are going to spend £21 million of taxpayers' money. They're investing this in global LGBT plus rights. Now, by conflating lesbians, gays, and bisexuals with trans people, right, you immediately create a situation of tension. And I can assure you that the main beneficiaries of that, what can only be described as a jamboree, is not going to be fighting against discrimination against lesbians and gays or bisexual people. It's going to be dominated by the trans activists, and it's going to be a forcing of that unhappy marriage between trans and gay people, which shouldn't exist because there's no relationship between the two. So it's almost as though they can't, they're constantly looking over their shoulder at their kind of identitarian activists, their own members. And so they've brought this guidance out and announced this at the same time.
Sure. Let me. Did you see the guy? Oh, wait a minute. I got a statement from the government. They say, in terms of what you just said, Claire, there's more than £20 million. This investment reaffirms the UK's commitment to defending the human rights and freedoms of all people, including those who are LGBT+. The thing is, you know, as you say, conflating homosexuality with trans people is a bit like that, conflating gay people with paedophiles, which is what they do in Russia. Do you know what I mean?
You can be a trans person, but the problem is that part of the trans ideology is to refuse to acknowledge biological sex as a fixed entity. And so you are in a situation in which a lesbian is accused of being discriminatory if they say that they are not interested in a man who identifies as a woman. Can you imagine? You're trying to, you know, meet up with some fellow lesbian. A man who identifies as a woman wanders in, and if you say, I'm not interested in you sexually, that is then seen to be phobia, transphobia. And so it is ridiculous because it's actually a denial of single sex. And by the way, that £21 million, right? I just read that on the government website. In the press statement, they brought out
21 million quid on sort of global.
They brought it out on a global day. Now, I only know about this because the government announced it. If they wish to clarify it for everyone and what is she going on about, don't put it out as a press release.
Unbelievable.
Right? So let me tell you.
I think you just gave us a sort of exclusive there, Claire.
I mean, it's they've put it out publicly because I know they're worried they're going to get a load of stick from their trans allies in public sector unions and so on, who'll moan about these guidance.
What a mess, what a mess. Let me play you this. This is that, you will have seen this by now, but this is a citizen of the United Kingdom making his feelings clear about the Labour government to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, yesterday. Watch this.
You're ruining the country. Get Keir Starmer out. Look, England flags. You're useless. Labour parties are useless.
I love our country. And one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British.
I'm not sure whether shouting at a politician is British or un-British or whatever, but what I found interesting about that film is, and I thought that guy was, you know, perfectly within his rights. He was pretty good-natured about it, let's be honest, and he wasn't the only one shouting at her. But what struck me was that guy. I don't want to stereotype anybody, but that was a white van working-class man. And he despises this Labour government. He despises everything they've done. What did he shout? Yeah, useless. Well, you know, that was the traditional Labour voter. He's shouting about Nigel Farage and reform. When you see that, and as I say, he wasn't the only person shouting at Rachel yesterday, you think, well, maybe old Andy Burnham up in Makerfield is going to have a lot of trouble, because that white van man, I think, is pretty typical of the people who live in Makerfield, a solid working class constituency. The working class have fallen entirely out of love with the Labour Party, haven't they?
I think they have. Listen, one of the things that's really funny about the Makerfield by-election is that Keir Starmer's just announced that he's going to go and canvass with Andy Burnham.
Well, Andy's lost it then.
That's what I was thinking. God, I assume that this is a sort of operation to destroy Burnham's vote. Because you can imagine Starmer turning up in the constituency and everybody just going, what the hell's he doing here? Because the whole, you know, Andy Burnham's whole shtick is, I'm not Keir Starmer. I'm not, you know, I'm not the unpopular face. And, you know, there's no doubt about it. Reform are not going to walk in and win that seat easily. But the tension is exactly as you've explained, which is actually, if you look at what Andy Burnham's, or listen to what Andy Burnham's saying, it's basically status quo establishment stuff. I mean, he's not going to change anything to the Labour Party. I mean, I think he's going to actually, arguably, be more in hock to the activists in the Labour backbench ranks myself. But he's sort of saying, oh yeah, I'm going to carry on. Yeah. So therefore, it's a personality contest. And the truth is, Labour's problem is not Keir Starmer. He just embodies it. Labour's problem is that they have abandoned, betrayed the working class. And we started off with that story about the United Kingdom. The whole reason I was, in my speech, making the point was Keir Starmer, to save his skin, brought out a special film in which he called on ordinary people to fight for the soul of the country, and they identified the enemy as being the kind of people who might go on a United Kingdom march, right?
Yeah.
And that basically is the sort of contempt we saw around Brexit and ever since. And the working class have had enough.
Yeah,
they are not prepared to go along with that anymore. They might even vote for Burnham in Makerfield because, you know, getting your local man to be the Prime Minister is probably quite tempting. But they do not trust Labour at all. Labour is finished. It's a hollowed out entity with no working class support.
Exactly, and that guy, the white van man having a go at Rachel Reeves there, is the sort of person that Keir Starmer would say is far right. And
also he was a bit rude, right?
A bit, you know, but I thought he was quite good-natured, you know.
No, I'm not even criticising, but you think that, you know, there's people writing op-eds about misogyny against female politicians, how uncouth he was. You do think, oh, get out a bit more. Also, I went to a conference on Brexit the other day because Brexit is back in, because obviously the contempt for the working classes.
Of course,
you voted against what we told you to do, so we're going to overturn it. But anyway, I went to this conference. I had Steve Bray's mob all screaming, right? And apparently they're the nice people, right? They're the ones who are on the nice side of history.
Be kind, yeah.
Be kind, exactly. Lovely people.
I'll tell you, Claire. I want to go to Makerfield when Keir Starmer goes up there. I bet Andy Burnham's thrilled about that. But Claire,
it did make me laugh.
It makes me laugh as well. I got to go, but listen, that was great. Please come on the show again very soon. The brilliant Baroness Claire Fox, there, director of the Academy of Ideas.